What's up, y'all? What is shaking? It is episode 60 of the Golden Mike Live. Megan McDonough, founder of the Wholebeing Institute. Megan McDonough, I saw her speaking down in Miami a few months ago. Megan McDonough, who is going to be talking about basically Wholebeing in general today. I can't wait for you to start. It's good to have you today, Megan.
It is so excellent to be here with you, Mark. I feel like I'm understated around energy when I'm around you because you exude so much zest and energy. Good to be here with you, my friend.
Oh, thank you. And just in case y'all haven't met me, my name is Marc Cordone. I'm the founder of the Make Money Coaching Program. But more importantly, I'm a coach that focuses on positive psychology. Now, if y'all are tuning in for the first time and you're like, what is this whole positive psychology thing? I'm just going to sum it down to two quick statements or questions. Scale of 1 to 10. How happy are you today? How happy are you today? Scale of 1 to 10. Then also at the same time, scale of 1 to 10. How much do you feel like you're living your life in full purpose? If those babies are firing at a 10, you don't need a positive psychology coach. Just go out and live your life. But sometimes those things fluctuate. Sometimes we have purpose, but we're not feeling it on a daily basis. Or sometimes we know how to get happiness, hedonic happiness on a daily basis, but we don't necessarily have purpose. So Megan, I wanted to ask you a double-barreled question. How are you feeling in terms of your happiness today? And how are you feeling in terms of your fulfillment? Are you there?
Well, I've got to tell you, who could not be at a 10 listening to your delightful energy? I'm at a 10 because I'm here with you.
Love it. So for those of you watching live or watching the replay right now, Megan, I want you to put your hands up with me and I want you to make a heart. Show Megan, and how do you beat your heart over there? Show Megan and I some hearts if you're feeling it, if you feel great and you feel like you're living in purpose. Let's see it. Do not be afraid. Casey Brown's giving us a 10. I believe that's a 10 out of 10. Good to see you, Casey. Jorge, it's good to see you. I feel great. Gives us a big heart. I hope everything is going well down there in Puerto Rico. Jorge, thank you again. The best show. Takes one to know one. You are the greatest of all time. Now, here's the other thing about positive psychology. People always think that it's always about happiness, that it's always about craps and giggles, and it's always about, double rainbows and Pegasus dropping Skittles on us. It's Taco Tuesday every day. That's not necessarily what that is, y'all. That's some other form of thing. That's not happiness and positive psychology. We have our ups, we have our downs, we have our all arounds. You can be working at a job that you loved for 10 years, and all of a sudden you're like, I feel totally out of purpose and lost right now. That's part of the journey, y'all. That is part of the journey. You might have woken up 8 days in a row saying, I feel freaking fantastic. And now today you're like, something is off. Something is weird. I saw somebody online who posted that the puppy that they had for 18 years transferred over and now is in a different realm. You can go from super happy to feeling the feels in a different way. Those ups and downs are part of your journey. Your heart beats just like all of us, like Megan and I's. So give us a thumbs up. Let us know that you're living life and that you're getting through it. You're pushing through it. Now, here's the last one. Let's see if we can get the founder of the Wholebeing Institute to do this with us. The last one is this, and it's huge. And that is that no matter where you are, ups, downs, all arounds, that you are feeling optimistic about tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be an even better day than today was. There is another button down there if you're feeling optimistic that I want you to hit. And that button is the wow face. I want to see Megan McDonough and I make the wow face. What does your wow face look like, Megan McDonough? I knew you'd have fun with it. Okay, so Megan, we're not gonna do all this malarkey anymore. We're gonna get right to it. We're gonna start talking about Wholebeing, wellness. But before even all of that, before we even talk about you founding the Wholebeing Institute, what is your story?
Yeah. What is my story? Well, I was born. No, it wasn't like that. The story is this. How did I find myself with Wholebeing Institute? Really is this idea that this life is important, that we want to make the most of it. And when I was working in the corporate world some 20 years ago, I realized there was more that I had to give than I could give in the job position that I had. It was a great company, working for great people, doing good things. But I had reached a point where I felt like there was more to give in this life. And that actually gets back to this premise of this life is yours to live. It is yours to be your authentic self, and at the same time, reach for an aspirational view of who you are. So I had come to a decision at that point in the year 2000 that I had reached where I could go in the corporate world. And at that point, I had been doing yoga for a number of years. I was a yoga teacher along with my corporate job. And the skills that I had developed on the yoga mat, anybody who has taken yoga before knows that you become more aware of who you are as a person when you practice mindfully doing yoga. When you go into a yoga position and you change your hands, or you lift up through the spine, or you breathe with intention, that these things cultivate your attention in a certain way. And this helps you. This helped me at work. It helped with what I was doing on a daily basis. And I realized I wanted more of it. I actually wanted to shape my life around this idea of how am I intentionally using my attention to develop this one life I had to live. So that's sort of where I began, leaving the corporate world, starting with yoga, doing teachings and trainings and seminars. And all of that sort of crystallized for me when we built the Certificate in Positive Psychology program out of Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, one of the leaders in the field of positive psychology. And all of a sudden I realized, wow, I did not know the richness of the evidence-based work that was being done in human flourishing. Like I knew it from a yoga perspective, but listen, neurobiology, positive psychology, the sociology, the sciences had begun not just to look at what was wrong in the human condition, but began to look at peer-reviewed, evidence-based research on what does it look like for us to flourish, to actually not just diagnose illness, but diagnose happiness, not just fix what was wrong, but elevate what was right. And when I had that language, as you probably know, it changes how you can communicate with other people. And after we finished the last certificate in positive psychology, the very first certificate in positive psychology course, Tal and I co-founded the Wholebeing Institute with the idea we want to teach more people about this. We want to actually expend and expand and deepen our own wisdom and that of others in this community network that you, my friend, are a valuable part as a community member of this work. And what you're doing now with positive psychology coaching, you're doing it. You're serving the work forward. And that's why we exist, to teach it and then serve it forward so that we begin to have a positive, contagious network of good evidence-based science, but more importantly, the application of that science to our own well-being. That's my story, and I'm sticking to
it. So, Megan, I want to ask you this. Why do you think it's been such a default towards what we would consider the negative versus having to have a whole movement to focus on what's working? What has been the benefit of looking at just, what's not working first?
Yeah. So we can look at it at a micro level from our own individual life, and we can also look at it from a macro perspective. There is no doubt that the number one thing this organism of the human body wants to do is to keep itself alive. It's to not get killed, to keep it out of danger. That's the number one thing. Don't get killed, stay alive. And so there is within us this innate need to watch out for danger. This we call the negativity bias. Everybody has it, including the researchers who are studying science. And so the natural tendency when you look at the day or go out in the day is to say, hey, what's wrong? What could potentially hurt me? Where are the minefields that I could hit? And this negativity bias, it's there. It's part of the human experience. The interesting thing is that once we begin to see it in our own life, we have the capacity to choose to focus our attention on the good that's within us. And this is why we use the term whole being instead of happiness, because happiness suggests, as you rightly pointed out, happyology, smile and make it. Everything is well, rainbows and unicorns. And really, we discount the validity of protecting ourselves from harmful things when we don't say this is worthwhile as well. And we're not going to be consumed by that during the day. And we're going to take an appreciative eye towards our day so that we begin to elevate the good within us. Because if we live in this place of always watching out for danger, of always looking for the harm, preventing the bad, it takes a psychological toll on us. It closes us down. So what we tend to do is try and practice broadening our attention, of seeing more, of appreciating the good, recognizing our strength, being mindful of a bigger piece of who we are than just sort of the natural negativity bias that may pop up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I love the fact that you brought up the fact that we are pretty much hardwired to be looking for that negativity. And there's a whole bunch of research that looks at DNA polymerase nowadays, and how sort of the practice, some of the things put into practice by positive psychology is showing that our DNA polymerase gets longer, and that's associated with getting rid of stress. Like the more stressed out you are, the shorter the DNA strands are. And so in many ways, we tend to be prone to just be stuck in fight or flight. And then what gets nerve-wracking is that we feel like we're victims to our environment, and that our DNA just shortens and shortens and shortens and shortens. I love that idea of also broadening your attention, because it means that your perspective can shift to more things than just being a victim of circumstance and always being in fight or flight. We can look, I think it's called RAS, isn't it? Reticular or something RAS. There's a part of our brain that keeps us focused on one thing. And then when we shift our perspective, that can also help us with the way that we take in life. I am curious to hear what some people have responded when you've said that you've looked at happiness. I know that with me, I get quite the diaspora of responses that are like, you look at happiness, dude? Like, seriously? That's what you build your career around, happiness? Like, I'm curious as to either skepticism or are you just a woo-woo person? Like, what do you think people have started to adopt this yet, or is it still in the early adoption phase?
So my job is to really make the science as accessible as possible. I'm not here to convince anybody of anything. I am here to say, look, there's some good science that can help us live better. We have been put on this earth, and no one has handed us an instruction manual. At least in my case, I didn't get one. How to make the most? How do I actually work with the biology of self?
Yeah.
Our parents tried to do that. Our teachers tried to do that. They did it as best they knew how. That doesn't mean that they had access to the science that we now have about, for example, the fight or flight in the nervous system, and how simple breathing techniques change our nervous system, putting it either into a rest or digest mode or a fight or flight mode. I wasn't explained that in elementary school or in college, or even it wasn't until I went through yoga that I began to understand the biological impact of breathing. And we've been breathing
Yeah.
for as long as we've been alive. So I don't really care to say, listen, I teach you how to be happy. I will say, you're a human. We have within us the most complicated and sophisticated biology on this earth. Knowing how to use it, they get more training on how to fly a 747 than how to live this human life as best as possible.
Well, yeah, and that is true. And now that I think about it, I do get quite a few people saying, "Oh, so you're like a positive psychology guy? Like, can you tell me how to be happy?" Nope, no, I cannot. No, I cannot. But I can, like, thanks to some of the programs that I've been through Wholebeing, I definitely feel more educated. Now, I want to ask you this: you're the founder of the Wholebeing Institute. What, if you can narrow it down to an experience or a study? What was the study that you had read where you were like, "Whoa, this is a game changer. Like, this changes the way that I see my work, the work other people do, the way that the world works." Is there a particular one that you remember?
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of studies, I'll actually mention one, but I think even bigger than that is that people have to realize that when you're taught something or exposed to something, there's one thing that happens. But the other thing that really is most powerful about what you learn is when you actually take it in and experiment and try it for yourself. So we take the science and what the pedagogy or the process we go through at Wholebeing Institute is first to take it in, i.e. here's the studies, then you test it out. And if it works, then you live it throughout. So take it in, test it out, see what works, and live it throughout. Those three things are what creates change, because even science is not perfect either. And science takes an average of the people that are being studied. So they look at a bell curve, for example, on appreciation. Studies show that appreciation, that builds your capacity for well-being. So you take it and you try it out. Well, maybe it doesn't quite work for you the way that it did to the average folks in that study. So it may not be the most impactful practice for you. And that's why in the certificate in Wholebeing Positive Psychology, you get lots of tools based on lots of science, because you're taking it in, you're testing it out, you see what works, and then you live it throughout. You create habits, you create ways of being that becomes embedded in your own neural pathways. That's what's most important. I want to go back to an interesting, you asked about research in particular, and I want to go back to what you were saying about stress. And certainly living in this day and age, it's with the work demands, the fast-paced life, family demands, things that are happening in the world. Yeah, there's a lot of stress there. And I think what I find most fascinating that's come out in the research lately is work by Alia Crum, who did some work looking at stress as it pertains to our mindset about stress. So she looked at two different cohorts and said, let me show you this video about how stress is debilitating. In other words, stress is bad, it shortens your lifespan, it creates heart disease, blah, blah, blah. Here's how stress is debilitating. And she took another group and she said, let's go ahead and talk about how stress can be enhancing. In other words, stress can actually make us rise to new challenges. It can help us meet new demands. It can help us learn more. It can help us really push ourselves. So these two different groups, stress is debilitating and stress is enhancing, showed two different films and then went into a stressful situation. And these two studies, or these two cohorts, they went in and had to do a presentation, sell themselves basically in a sort of a mock job interview and present. And in one area, they were said, okay, that was a horrible job you did, and were given very negative feedback. In other words, they were both very stressful situations. Well, those people who were primed with the video, that stress is enhancing actually had higher DHEA levels, which is a type of hormone important for brain activity. They still had high cortisol level, but the difference between the DHEA level and the cortisol level, that ratio was different. In other words, those people who had the mindset that stress was enhancing actually had a better internal biology of the hormones as they reacted to stress. So, yeah, we don't need to even make blanket statements about stress being bad. If we looked at the whole of it, stress can also be enhancing. And this goes back to our definition of happiness. We don't need to think that happiness is good and sadness is bad. There's times actually where happiness is inappropriate and sadness is completely appropriate.
Right. So let's talk about this a little bit more, expanding from happiness towards the idea of whole being. The whole being. Talk about the definition of that, and talk about the expansion towards that.
Yeah, so we actually use the word whole being to describe this idea of human flourishing. You could use the word happiness, but I think in most people's mind, when you say happiness, they think smiley face happyology. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about whole person well-being. So these two words, whole person, means we take everything into account, that we recognize within us the whole spectrum of human capacity. And on the other side, look at well-being. You mash those two together and you have whole being. Whole person well-being, whole being, smush them together. Yes, and so that's what we talk about, and we look at whole person well-being through 5 perspectives. These are ways of which you can not only describe what is happening in the whole ecosystem of you, but also prescribe steps that will elevate your whole person well-being. So you're ready for what these 5 are?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. The acronym is SPIRE, S-P-I-R-E. And each of these elements are really a perspective to look at in your life. The first one, S, stands for spiritual. This means seeing the meaning in your life, and also living life mindfully, paying attention to this human experience. So spiritual may or may not mean the divine or God to you. It just may mean that you're looking at the bigger picture of meaning and mindfulness in your life. The second one is P for physical. And physical means that you're nourishing your body and you're using your body in a way that supports your well-being. In other words, standing tall, smiling when it's appropriate, taking deep breaths in, eating well, sleeping appropriately. This is taking care of the biology of this lovely physical body that you've been given. I mean, it really is a gift, all of the magnificence that this human body has. The next one is I for intellectual, which I know comes across as book learning, but really what it means is bigger than that. It means intellectual. How am I engaging my curiosity today? What captures my interest? And how can I be open to the experiences that come to me? So life is so full of wonder. It could be that you're reading great books or going to the art museum or looking at nature, engaging your curiosity in whatever way works for you. The next one is R for relational. Relations are the number one predictor of well-being. So what are the relationships that support your well-being? And by the way, what's your relationship to your own self? So the self-compassion and care that you show for yourself is a very important relationship to cultivate. And last but not least, emotional. That's what the E stands for. This means cultivating intentionally positive emotions throughout the day. We talked about this already with the negativity bias. How are we looking for the good? And how are we engaging grit and resilience when the times are tough? That's basically, in a nutshell, what SPIRE is.
Okay, so let's throw this out there. A few people are watching right now. How are you seeing this when it comes to application of
Mm.
things?
Yeah, good, good.
Yeah,
So so you have a prescription
yeah,
for the next steps. You just described, like you could take each one of those elements and say, all right, where am I in each one of those
yep,
elements? And your listeners can actually get a free Spire assessment on our website. I think you put it on the site,
yep.
wholebeinginstitute.com/wholebeing. You can go ahead and get a free Spire assessment, which means you can diagnose for yourself where you are on each one of those dimensions. But then you can go ahead and prescribe what one action will help me elevate my overall well-being. It could be
Hmm.
going for a walk, physical. It could be dancing to music or listening to music, which is intellectual and captures your interest. It could be going out with coffee with a friend because that's relational well-being. So you can then look at your description and then prescribe for yourself the actions that will maybe lift your happiness levels or well-being levels by 1, 2, 3, 5%, 10%. As you look at those options. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And one of the things that I love about the Spire model is basically now that whenever I'm asked about something, I just go to the Spire model. So, for
Yeah.
example, someone this morning or yesterday asked me to write an article about what's the best thing that you can do with or as a college student who's matriculating into college. What are things you can do to have a successful transition into college? And I was like, well, there's this thing out there called Spire, and you can keep this with you no matter where you go. You think about a college student, of course, there's a lot of meaning making, trying to figure out purpose. So there's that physical piece, or the spiritual piece, the physical piece being, hey, I just got this meal plan card, but like nutrition wise, I don't really know what that looks like. I used to go to bed at 10 o'clock because mom said so, but now I have this whole regimen that I have to create for myself. Intellectually, how am I engaging with the things that I'm learning? Not necessarily how am I memorizing things and taking tests, but how am I taking Plato's cave and applying that to my life? Relationally, I'm new on campus, so how am I making friends? And then we could think about take it even deeper and say, what are the types of relationships I'm engaging? Are they virtuous ones? And then finally, emotionally, I'm a little bit homesick. I think that I should feel the feels. Everyone's happy around me. Maybe I can do something about that and use my phone for something positive and pick up the phone and FaceTime. So, I mean, we could flip that from the standpoint of an empty nester now, right?
Yeah.
And say, how
Yes.
does fire look? So,
Yeah.
um,
I love what you're saying, by the way, for
uh-huh.
those of your listeners that are coaches can relate to some very important points about what you're saying. First of all, as a coach, you want to help people see where they are now from a
Yeah,
whole perspective. In other words, sometimes when people come to you for coaching, they're only
yeah,
looking at the problems and they're not seeing the whole of themselves. So you're right. Spire can be used where you are now, grounded in this moment. And it can also be an aspirational tool, like the college student going off to college, thinking about how am I reaching
yeah.
up and stretching. So I love the image of humans being having both roots and wings so
Mm,
that we can be grounded authentically in who we are as we use the Spire model, as you just did for the new college student or the empty nesters, and reach out to our aspirational self of what
mm.
could be, the possibilities we could live into. And that's very exciting to me, is that you don't have to become other than who you are. You just have to become more of who you already are in order to reach those.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. It's so simple and then I have a little joke. This is not funny. It's a dad joke. I have I just realized it's not funny, but it's like I'm sure you did this when you came up with Spire, but it's like when all five are firing off, then you're inspired.
You're inspired. That's right.
Right. Now, you brought up this aspirational self, so I want to go there for a second. Um, so many of us um, will feel like we're settling, and there's something more out there. There's something greater than for us, or there's something or someone we knew that we would be, and so we feel like we're settling. When you talk about your aspirational self, is there like a specific aspirational self that each of us have, or is that an aspirational self of billions of possibilities?
Gosh, I just love this question because for so long I really agonized over finding just the right thing of who I wanted to become and what was I heading.
Yeah.
It is painstaking. The agony we put ourselves under, thinking that if I only found the right job or the right goal or the right aspiration of who am I supposed to be, that's not at all the truth of how this mind body system works. So here's how even the notion of self is a psychological construct. So we have many selves. We don't have just this like one, this is who I am. We have what we'd call an authentic self in this moment, how I'm being, what are my tendencies, how I tend to be. But then in our mind's eye, we also have what psychologists call possible selves. So these are ideas of who we could become in the future. And some of those might be pretty scary. Like maybe some possible selves I think of every now and again are, geez, one possible self is I could be broke and be homeless. Another possible self is, geez, I could build a huge business and be a multimillionaire. Another possible self is, oh my goodness, I could become a grandmother and have wonderful grandchildren running around. These are all like separate narratives. And in fact, the narrative therapies will say we actually begin constructing these possible selves as we author them in our own head. So here we are now being this self called Megan. And Megan is constructing these possible selves through the narratives I'm telling myself. And these narratives and these possibilities become more real as we make day-to-day choices, either towards or away certain possible selves. Does this make sense?
It absolutely does. Yeah. And
Now,
I'm also feeling the tension as you make decisions that go away from those possible selves and how you could become more discontent.
And one of the things that we can draw upon is actually go back in our history and draw on another concept called our best possible self. So we all have times in our lives where we've shined, we've used our strengths, we've done great things. It could be as simple as really reading a book to our child and being fully present and fully there with compassion and love. It could be as grand as doing a huge keynote in front of 10,000 people. Whatever that best self moment is, it's when you felt alive. It's when you felt you were at your best. So if you begin, instead of thinking about your possible selves in the future, if you pull forward first your best possible self and ask yourself, geez, what are some times where I really felt proud of an accomplishment. I felt good about what I did. It could be volunteering at a soup kitchen. It could be any little or big thing. You can do that exercise of the best possible self over a number of days. You could use different possible selves, scenarios and stories. And what you can start pulling forth from that is some commonalities about what are some things that elevate you. And you can use the best possible self to develop your possible selves in the future, given your authentic self in this moment in time. This, by the way, is all of the stuff that's in Module 1, which is this is Module 1, which I'm teaching you right now, which is the Introduction to Wholebeing Happiness. It's a 5-week online course that describes. Listen, we have all these selves. We have our authentic self. We have our best possible self. We have our future self. Oh, and by the way, we have our art self. This is this part of us that says, oh, we would like to go and do nature photography, but I was always brought up that I ought to be a CPA. So our art self is another voice in our head about who this construct of self could be, if that's helpful.
Yeah, and it sounds like such a process of, I'm not saying, I'm using an I statement. For me, it was such a process of learning and unlearning at the same time.
Yeah.
Especially with the odd self. There were certain things that I thought were rigid, and it needed to happen in order for me to be filled and happy, and it wasn't necessarily the case. There was sort of more external pressures sometimes that I would feel. Now, I just want to throw this out there to have some fun. For those of you watching the replay and watching live right now, I invite you to be a part of this conversation. When was the last time, or what was the scenario in which you can remember you, just even if it's the smallest thing, you being your best possible self? And I wanted to ask you, Megan, what was the last time, or what's your last recollection that you remember being your best possible self? Talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, well, one of the stories I always tell when I think about the best possible selves, one of the highlights for me is when we actually succeeded in building the certificate in positive psychology program. Yeah. I mean, it was such a high for me to take nothing and cobble together something that I could see changes in people's face, how they carried themselves. I mean, to be with these people for almost a year, the very first one, it was so much hard work to learn it, to build it, to do it, and to see how it came out. A high for me, no doubt. I mean, that was really the beginning of Wholebeing Institute, when I realized that, oh my goodness, this is so meaningful and fulfilling to me personally. And it serves the world in such a good purpose. And I got to use my strengths and bring them to bear for this activity. It was like a no-brainer for me. This. I continually come back to the Wholebeing Institute, the certificate in positive psychology, students like you, that this is for me extremely meaningful and fulfilling.
Yeah, and I can't be more grateful that you founded things like that. I could talk for hours, y'all, about the Wholebeing Institute certificate in positive psychology experience. There's large groups, but then there's also these small groups that keep in touch. We've already received our certificate, and we're still meeting. And it's just it's a place to continue to play with and do it with people who are fully supportive of you playing. It's absolutely wonderful. And so many times I think that ought self gets in the way, and it says, you're not supposed to do this, you're not supposed to do that. And here we have permission to do so many things. Wanted to ask you this too. Positive psychology, Wholebeing, all this stuff. Where do you see it heading? Because it started out with some of the work in UPenn, and then they would call it a sort of positive psychology second wave right now, where they're talking about grit and resilience. What do you think the future of this is looking like?
So I actually want to go back to one of your comments about the odd self and tie it back in, because I think that this is the second wave. And when you say you still keep in contact with your small group from the year-long program, you are pointing to a relational self, like who we are in relationship can actually elevate who we become. So who we hang out with matters. And one of the things we work very hard at doing in the certificate program, in fact, all of our courses, is saying, what's the relational field by which we become even better versions of ourselves? And we know that when we're in a positive contagion of like-minded people who are also learning this language and living and applying the science, that we're more apt to live it. Like, we're more apt to do more of it when we're in that ecosystem. So I think the next wave of positive psychology is absolutely in this place of relational well-being. How are we creating communities by which we stick together and drive the work forward or serve the work forward? So number one is the relational connections and keeping those going as we build community. And then others is also to really elevate the physical self. That many times when we think about positive psychology or the science of well-being, it's from the neck up. It's a cognitive only construct of who we are. Well, how we move our body impacts how we think. When we move with purpose and zestfully and move forward like you do with your hands, and you've got all this energy, it cannot help but change how you feel and how you think. So what I'm beginning to see is this overlap of the sciences. One of them being the physical sciences of movement and whole being expression, the wholeness of who we are from a physical side, also being elevated in this next realm. Now, the other interesting thing, as I saw you just put up on the screen, overlap of sciences, it's true that, neuroscience attends neuroscience conferences and positive psychology folks attend positive psychology sciences. But us practitioners, those of us that are bringing all of the sciences of human flourishing together in an application process, having a broader perspective, a multidisciplinary approach to how we're applying it in coaching and therapy and parenting and self-development. We're the ones sometimes doing the overlap because the people who are doing the sciences may be doing it in separate silos. So hopefully the relational field in the next positive psychology 2.0, physical well-being and actually elevating the movement, and then third, this multidiscipline approach to human flourishing.
And it makes a lot of sense, even the way that even the way that when you started talking about, it is one thing for us to understand positive psychology, but that's where positive psychology ends. Then it's about going and living your life. And then living your life is applied sciences. It's no sciences. It's just doing it, just the act of doing. When you're talking about relationships, you're beginning to touch on positive sociology now, right? And like those are all just constructs. Those are all just constructs that we needed to make up to get through college, and to help us understand certain paradigms. But when it comes to where positive psychology is going, I'm feeling I'm totally getting jazzed about this, that it is a multidisciplinary approach, which means that everyone has a say in it. Everyone has a stake in it.
Right. Well, at the end of the day, you are the chief research scientist in the lab of you. That's your job. You're the chief scientist of the lab of you. So go ahead and pick and choose. Especially, that's why people are listening. I think it's because they're learning from you, Marc. They're learning to say, how is it how apply this? At the end of the day, you look at the data and the research from science. You live into it and say, what works for me? And does this make me a better version of me? Does it make me appreciate my life more? Do I become a better person because of it? Because I'm living it.
Yeah.
End of the day, you want to look back at your life. Everybody has this wish. Everybody wants to look back on their life and say, yeah, I lived the life. I lived a life that was meaningful to me.
Yeah.
As best as I could, which I guarantee when you look back because of the negativity bias, you'll say, I should have done this differently or that differently. But even on our deathbed, we have to remind ourselves and look at
that negativity bias.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for hours about this. Let's talk a little bit now about the Wholebeing Institute, where it's at, the certificate that we've been talking about. I've also had the pleasure of taking a couple other courses there. I took a course with Dr. Ryan Nemec and Jane Anderson on strengths. If y'all have ever heard of the VIA character strengths, which was amazing. I'm currently upping my skills as a positive psychology coach in the brand new positive psychology program that you for coaches program that you got going on there. Just talk to us about the institute in general and what's going on.
Yeah, so thank you for mentioning those. Yeah, we have a whole bunch of programming that's around digesting the science in a practical way to live into it. So Linda Wallace, as you said, teaches the positive psychology coaching, really teaching coaches the skills of applying the science of positive psychology and coaching relationships. Your certificate program, actually, I'm going to tell your listeners something I haven't announced to anybody else yet. Actually, you'll probably get the email next week. Would you like me to announce it now to you? Yeah! We are bringing the certificate in positive psychology back to Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health. Very pleased to announce that. Kripalu, for those of you who may not have heard about it, I don't know why, you should. It is the largest yoga retreat center in North America. It's an amazing place of beautiful grounds, lovely food, yoga and yoga dance 3 times a day. It really is on the leading edge of leading a good life, human flourishing. They've been doing it for 40 years. They know how to do it well. We started the first certificate program there. So we actually, for the first time in a number of years, are going back home to our Kripalu partners to run their certificate in Wholebeing positive psychology. So there you have it. There's a big news.
Amazing.
I'll be actually making that announcement to the rest of our community next week. It's very good news. And of course, other classes too. We have, for those of you who can't commit to a long study of almost a year, we also have, or coaching program. We also have self-directed online learning courses where you can, at your own pace, go through a course in your own time. So I hope you and others continue to learn how to fly this plane of the human experience.
Yeah, I believe the one of the newer ones I got to taste a bit of was I think it's Maria talking about resilience. There's a resilience course that's out there.
You're so good. You're so good for prompting me. Yes. How did I forget Maria? How did I forget dear Maria, one of our top faculty in the certificate program? So yes, she's one of our core faculty. She teaches Teaching for Transformation, which is a course about how to actually present this material with your authentic best self. She also has the Resilient Quest, which is during dark and difficult times.
So awesome. So awesome. It's like the hero's journey applied.
That's right. That's right. Because as we said, Wholebeing and happiness is not all about rainbows and unicorns and sunshine. It's also about being there in dark and difficult times. And Maria teaches that part as well. Thank you for that prompt.
Yeah, absolutely. And when is the next certificate program starting for positive psychology?
The next one is starting February of next year. Registration's open next week at Kripalu.
Registration is opening next week.
You're the first to hear. Come join us.
The link is below. I'm crossing my fingers and hopefully I'll be with y'all because I never got to fly out there and finish my final project. There was a hurricane going on. So we did the best that we could. They had me on a little laptop or something, but it's not the same. It's never the same as being there in person with folks. Hope y'all would consider, but at very least, go and check out the site and all its offerings. It is wonderful, whether you're a coach or not. It's a wonderful way to just sort of think about rewiring that mind and becoming living in that world of possible selves and beginning to get those to flourish. You've said enough, Megan McDonough. You've said enough.
Thank you, Marc Cordone.
You've already you've leaked it. You've said too much. But I wanted to thank you. And for those of you watching, again, please share this out. I want you to like Megan. I want you to love Megan. I want you to want some more of Megan. Her link is there. Thank you for everything that you're doing with Wholebeing. Thank you for starting it up. Now, this is why we call the show the Golden Mic Live. So I have one more activity, if you will, visualization. I'm a coach, so I'll use the word visualization with you. And it's this, Megan. I want you to imagine that a golden mic is now coming down from your ceiling and it's resting in front of you now. Now, this golden mic has the special capabilities of broadcasting to the entire world and translating into every language. When I flip the switch, your golden mic will go live and everyone will be listening. What is it that you will say? So, Megan McDonough, you are on the Golden Mic Live.
Mm. Wow, that's a lovely thing to think about. And I didn't even think about it when I pictured that coming down in front of me. There was only one thing that I would end with. You want to know what it is? You are so loved.
Megan, you can take that golden mic and you can drop that golden mic like it's hot. Megan McDonough dropping that golden mic. Megan, you have officially said it all. I just want to thank you again. For those of you who want to watch the replay, listen to the nuances about that Spire model. It's awesome. It is absolutely awesome. This has been episode 60 of these golden mics that we've done. It's Thursday, which means this. I'm shutting off the golden mic. I'm getting off of social media and I'm going to spend some time with my family. I hope you all make some decisions about that as well, to spend some time with the ones that you love. And my final question for you is this, y'all. If you're feeling good and you're living in your fullest purpose, what is your responsibility to the greater good? I'm Marc Cordone. This is Megan McDonough. Peace out. We'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Stick around.